Trauma. Everyone has it. No one talks about it. It seems easier to stay silent, ignore it, or stuff it than it does to honor it, learn from it, and finally heal. Trauma is debilitating, yet so often we suffer in silence. Trauma is not meant to be battled alone, and we are no longer going to suffer in silence. Together, we are creating a safe place to speak, to share our stories, and grow our strength as we heal. Together, we are giving a voice to those who have been silenced, bringing darkness into light, and letting God use our stories. Today, we find ourselves again. We relight our spark and let it light up the world. Stop SIS is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating on issues of trauma and trafficking, as well as the amazing power of the healing journey. Welcome to Stop SIS. Hey, you guys. Welcome back to Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh, and I am here with my friend Rachel Timothy, and we just got back from a Stop SIS weekend where we had 2 speaking engagements, and we got to meet with some survivors who've been within our programs and their grannies, and it was so stinking cool. So today we're going to share with you a bit about our experience over this weekend, as well as what we heard from the crowd, from those listening. I mean, these conversations, it turns into a conversation, right? Rachel shares her story and we talk about the program STOPSIS offers, but then people have a lot of questions about all of it, the trafficking, how trauma impacts our human brain and body, as well as the healing journey. And we had some frequently asked questions that we're going to chat about with you today. So Rachel, let's dive right in, and I'd love to hear a bit about your experience from the weekend. How was it for you?
Oh, it was amazing. It always blows my mind when people want to hear my story because I know it's hard. It's not an easy thing to listen to. But when you find people who want to know because they want to understand and they want to be able to help others, or they can see pieces of their story and my story, and it kind of gives them encouragement for moving along in their healing journey. When you see things like that, it encourages you, and you just feel like, okay, once again, God is giving me a wink of you have purpose, even in that darkness. Like there was, it wasn't his plan necessarily, but we're going to use it and we're going to make a difference with it. And so it was just, that's exactly what the weekend felt like.
Yeah. Yeah. People, they either don't know much at all, or they're just starting to learn about the evils in this world, and they're hungry to learn, and they're hungry to ask. And, I feel like people leave these events with this, like, no, this cannot be happening in my town. And their eyes are now open to people in their surroundings, but also to potential brothels in their neighborhoods.
Yeah. And it's just so nice to see that response, because I mean, that is the correct response to have. Like, no, this shouldn't be happening. And in years past, when I would speak, like I would agree with them, but I wouldn't really have many answers either. And now I feel like the further along in my journey that I've gotten, I can be right there with them in that anger, but now I can also answer some of their questions as well.
Give them a next step potentially.
Yes.
I feel like this is just like, these are the things I'm dreaming of. But I feel like your presentation that you created for this weekend will eventually be your TED Talk. And we'll take that. We got to take that hour and bring it down to 19 minutes, 18 minutes. But what you did was you brought people on a journey of your story, but you also gave them nuggets of wisdom throughout. And you really led them to your workbook, your new trauma workbook called Reflecting Ownership. Do you want to share a little bit about the 4 quadrants that you speak of?
Yeah, so I talk about how each of us have these four components, and it's our heart, mind, body, and soul. And from that is our four innate desires: to be known, to be loved, to be seen, and to be heard. And everybody has it. It's just our desires in life. It's natural, but perpetrators know that, and so they will slowly but surely, through the grooming process, through gaslighting, and they begin to take ownership of those four desires and four components of a child, and it makes it to where the child doesn't have a voice. They don't feel like they even have a way to speak up for themselves or to fully understand what's going on. And so that's what happened with me. And through that process of being groomed and being tricked, my truth continued to be pushed down. And then when I got to the point where all of these flashbacks came back in 2014, it was like my truth knocking on the door, and I had to make a decision. Am I going to deal with this or am I not? And it's kind of like ready or not, you're going to deal with it one way or another. And you can either deal it in a healthy way or a non-healthy way. And of course, like everybody, I wanted to deal with it in a way that didn't involve pain. And I tried several years of different coping skills just to take the pain away instead of actually dealing with my truth. And I think we come across that all the time with our survivors. And so finding that who it was that took ownership of those four components and then taking that ownership back and truly living in our truth is kind of what reflecting ownership does.
Yeah. And so throughout these so we do speak and we share a bit about Stop SIS, and then there's a Q&A time. And it's during this Q&A time where people share their own experiences, their own stories within their own families. And even after that, when it's mingling time, people come up to us and tell us their stories. What are some of the frequently asked questions you get during that Q&A time?
That Q&A time is my favorite time. It really is, because I mean, just the questions that are asked and seeing people's heart, I love it. We had some people stand up and start to share about what it has been like for them as a parent. And we've had people when maybe their child was sexually abused when they were little and what that was like for them in their grieving process as the parent. And we heard some comical but yet real thoughts from parents when it came to how to deal with a perpetrator. And sometimes it's a perpetrator that's within their family, and just seeing what it was like for them. But so many of these parents are dealing with kids who are struggling now, and they don't want to see the truth and they don't want to deal with it. And that was probably one of the biggest questions we had.
Yeah, I think with any, I want to say teenager, but I'm sure even any age really from the outside, you can seemingly clearly see what that person might need who's struggling. But when you're the person struggling, you either don't see it, don't want to see it, or are too busy trying to pretend like everything's okay, that you're not letting that truth bubble up. You're continuing to push it down. Why do you think so many survivors don't want to get help?
I think it reroutes your plans completely. Like when you think, let's say it's a 13-year-old or something, they want to be playing sports or going to sleepovers with friends and like doing all of these normal kid activities, and it thwarts all of that. And now you're looking at counseling, you're looking at dealing with an internal pain that a lot of friends won't understand. You're now quote unquote different. You're grown up all of a sudden. And it would be a whole lot easier to say, no, I don't even want to go there. I just want to be a kid.
And so instead of quote dealing with it, which we'll talk about next, it seems like the first thing most people do is, I'm fine, everything's fine, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to push it over there and I'm going to pretend like it didn't happen, even though I'm experiencing these negative coping skills, even though, my house is on fire, but everything's fine. And they live in this space for a season until potentially hitting a rock bottom.
Yeah, until it gets so bad that it finally opens their eyes. Because yeah, sometimes you don't even see the coping skills. You just think, oh, this is my way of this is just who I am.
Right.
No, you made that decision for a reason.
So what can parents do when they see a child self-destructing like that?
Yeah, and that was one thing. Like we had parents who came up to us and said, I wanted my daughter to come tonight. And I didn't know, do I force them or do I leave it up to them? And never want to force them, in my opinion, because if they don't want to be there, they're not going to take anything away from it anyway. Um, but I guess to me, it just goes back to pausing life. What's your thoughts?
Creating that pause. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, in the counseling world, right? You're right. Somebody could sit there in the chair and not have any growth because they're not ready for it. So there's
Mhm.
an element of kind of let them self-destruct a bit. But I've also known parents who are like, you're going to inpatient, like we're taking you to the ER. I know you were kind of forced to go to Selah House.
Mhm.
I think of this is not a good example, but my 11-year-old will say, make me do something because I always forget how much fun it will be and I never want to leave the house. So he bucks at everything. And the first answer is always,
Mhm.
and so I have to ignore that and say, get in the car, we're going. And so I have to, because I know what's best for him, I have to kind of force him, but he's always glad afterwards. Now, I don't know if that's a good example because you're not necessarily going to do something fun like bowling. You're going to counseling. You're going to take them to do something hard, and they have to be a bit willing. But again, I'm sure you were dragged to counseling and you didn't really want to go at first.
Um, Counseling, let's see. Counseling, I think, I don't know that I was necessarily dragged. Granny maybe would disagree. I gotta go back and try to remember, but I was definitely dragged to the police station and to the courthouse and to those places. And it was one of those things that did need to be done. Like they weren't wrong in doing that. It was a matter of it was really a matter of life and death. And when you think about that with your kid, this really is a matter of life or death because some of these coping skills, though a kid thinks they're not that big of a deal, they are. And you start to take that wrong path now, and the longer you go on that wrong path, the harder it's going to be to get right back, to where you want to be. So, in a way, it is a very much so life and death situation. And I think parents, they're going to have to make that hard decision.
I know, because there's a part of me that's like, you're going to have to watch them hit rock bottom because they have to decide. But then there's another part of me that's like, make them go. But like, do you physically drag them? You know what I mean? I think that's the tricky part is and maybe everybody's different based on where they are in the process.
I think there's ways that you can give them some freedom, like let them make some choices along the way, but it's like this is a must. Now I will let you choose like where we go or what we do or how we go about this in a sense. Um, but you are getting help. You are not going to continue down this path.
Okay. So the must is, and again, if they're 18 or under 18, all of those things might make a difference too.
Sure.
But you're getting like this way, that the path we're going is not taking anyone in a place that's helpful. So you need help for your own self, right? And the way that you go about it, there's 3 options. And I think that laying out some of those options is helpful. I was working with a client yesterday who we were creating a program. She's creating a health coaching program. And she basically said, I'm just going to let them pick their goal. And then based on their goal, we're going to do what's next. And although that's part of the process, I told her people are coming to you because they don't have brain space for this and they need to be told what to do. If it were easy, they'd already be doing it. So I kind of liken that to somebody who needs to get help, what does that even mean? Like, let's maybe lay out 3 options. We can do inpatient, outpatient, or a safe house type place, or we could go to this counseling or this counseling, or all of the things. There's several options, but I do like the idea of presenting them, because if the person who's in fight or flight mode or crisis mode or chronic stress mode, they might not have the brain space to figure it all out on their own.
No, they're in survival mode. And it's like, okay, what's your goal? I just don't want to hurt. Okay, well, I mean, that's probably not an option at this point. I mean, that'll be down the road. But right now, we just have to focus on working. I mean, it's like if you have a broken bone, well, I just don't want to hurt. Well, I mean, in the beginning, it hurts.
Right. What other questions did we get?
So I think one of the neatest parts for me was I got to have Granny there the second day. And I think people love to pick her brain and your brain as much as they do my brain. And so it's neat to have all 3 of us there to be able to have conversations with these people and to have different perspectives and experiences to share. But one thing, when it was all kind of done, and one of the men in the back, I just remember him saying, "This is terrible. Like, how do we even function in this world when we know this type of evil is taking place?" And like, you could just see the frustration all over his face. And Granny's response to him, I just loved it, because she's like, "Yes, you're right. This is evil. It's awful." But her walking with me through this evil, her response to him was, "I have actually seen Jesus in ways I never would have otherwise. I've been able to experience miracles that I never would have otherwise." And so oftentimes, like, we think if we walk alongside a survivor through this evil, that we're just going to keep getting knocked down and knocked down. And it's just, we're sacrificing our whole lives and like whatever. But really, you're going to be blessed, and you're going to get to see the face of God in a way that you probably wouldn't have if you didn't walk in this storm with this survivor. And I think it was just a beautiful way for her to explain, like, yes, it's awful, but that doesn't mean Jesus isn't right there. And we can see him in the midst of it as we're going through it.
Right. Trauma is not a death sentence.
Amen.
And there is life after trauma. And I think for both the survivor and the supporter to really understand that and to know that and to believe that is powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was neat for them to get to see just that whole process. I mean, shoot, when I got up and started talking Friday night, and I said, "I don't know if you can recognize, but I'm not the same person I was last time I was here." I look out in the crowd and people are crying. And another lady had said the second day, like, "Yeah, the last time I heard you speak, you were like in a fetal position and curled up in a ball as you shared your story. And now, like, you're standing up, you're speaking with confidence." Like, and I think them seeing where I'm at now gives them hope.
Yeah. Yeah. What did they see 2 years ago when you spoke?
Scared, broken individual. And, they wanted to do everything they could back then to help. And one thing that Granny and I talked about somewhat after this weekend was, like, yes, there was that huge pivot point where things really changed for me. But if you think backwards to the 7, 8 years prior to that, all of the prayers that led up to that pivot point were just as important. And none of it could have happened if it wasn't for all of it. And so I think of the survivors in the crowd who are still stuck in that darkness, and the importance of praying with them and praying over them and encouraging them. And even though they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, those prayers matter, because at some point there's going to be this huge pivot and it's going to be beautiful, but you need all of it.
Absolutely. We made shirts for this weekend called, they say, "Break the Silence." If you can see, I have red and Rachel has teal. You want to describe why we chose these colors?
So we chose red because back when Denise introduced us to the personality test, there's like the 4 colors in the personality test. Several of us girls were yellow, which is kind of that people pleaser. Really, it's just you're living in survival mode. There's good about yellow too, but there's a lot of people pleasing in it. And we are starting to see our red pop out, where we have some confidence in our words and we are doing more bold, courageous things. And so as our red's popping out, we thought red would be a cool color. And then blue is the color that goes with childhood sexual abuse, I believe. Teal, blue. Yeah.
So another thing happened while we were there that startled me, I guess I would say. Because you guys, I'm sure if you're listening, you've heard the word brothel before, and you've heard that it happens somewhere in another town, far, far away. And maybe even it's this old dilapidated house, but it's like Victorian. I don't know. I kind of always picture that's what I picture a place like maybe even a lavish place where girls live and they get, I don't know. I don't know what I think. I guess I've never
like inner city stuff, with gangs and different things. You could picture it that way. I've heard that a lot.
What's that movie that came out that's about the girl that lived in the brothel and was saved, and it's about the biblical story?
Oh, Redeeming Love.
Yeah. So in Redeeming Love, she is this, it's like royalty, like she's got the silk robe or all these things. So those are the things that I have pictured in my mind when I think of a brothel. And we all probably have our own pictures of what we think of when we hear that word. Well, our first meeting when we got there was with the Safe House and the Safe House offices. We met there and we were chit-chatting. They've known Rachel for a few years, and we were catching them up to speed on what she's been up to and what they've been up to. And when we get into the parking lot, Rachel says, oh, the building next door, attached in the same strip mall, is actually a brothel. And I'm like, wait, what? And she said, yes, it's an Asian brothel. I mean, you guys have seen it where like it's called One Spa, this specific one. There's all over, but they like don't make sense, like meaning you can tell they're Asian, like the names of them. And from what I learned, Asian women are brought over with the promise of being able to send money back to their family, but then they're housed in these brothels where they are not allowed to leave, which to me sounds like they are a prisoner. And then they are, they have men coming in from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. and they stay there, they eat there, they sleep there, and they service men there. And so again, you hear about that. I'm a little shocked, like, wait, what? Like, can't we just barge in and like take these girls with us, And they're telling me and about what they do, and they call the police, and they have called the police, and Rachel will speak to that. But in the midst of our meeting, a man walked in and he looked right at us. And I will never forget his face because he looked like a grandpa. He had white hair, a beard, and like we all know why he's going in there. And he just goes in. I mean, I don't even know how long his appointments are, right? And then he leaves, and that's that. And it's happening in strip malls across our nation. And so we chatted about it at the meetings. We took pictures of it. We were like, we need to picket this place, like people march outside of Planned Parenthood. Like, we need to pick, these are prisoners in here. And we had a survivor go back home, and she drove by a place that looked exactly like what we had seen. And she stopped and she went in and she said, can you please give me a menu of your services? And this Asian lady said to her, this is not for you. And so she, it's similar to me, like, what can we do? And this has been miles in her, she's driven by it plenty of times and had no idea. So, Rachel, I'd love to hear what the police have said to you when you guys have gone to the police and told them about this brothel, and what are the options?
Yeah, it's gonna make you sick. I've literally had a police say that the only way that they could catch him is if they go in undercover and actually have sex with the women. That is to prove that what they're doing is sexual, or to do some sort of a sexual act. And if that's the case, then really all it proves is prostitution. The women will then be put in jail. The owners of the women will, pay for their bail, get them out, and then put them right back to business. And so because these women are over the age of 18, they do not speak our language. They are not able to say, I am a trafficking or victim. Like, they're not able to say that. They don't even know what's going on. They just know they left their home thinking that they were making a good decision. And now, like, the shame that would come to their family if they knew what they were doing is enough to keep them silent in and of itself. But they stay there and they're obedient because that is the only option they feel like they have. I was told by an officer, whether this is true or not, that one of his buddies on the police force actually went in and did have sex with one of the women to prove it. And he ended up in a divorce, and then nothing came of it. I mean, like, these women next door, or I'm sorry, like the ministry next door, like, they have done what they can to try and learn the language. They'll go in and try to talk to some of these women and minister to them, but they're not there for all that long. They get transferred to one of the other brothels in town. There are 9, or it could be to a different town, and they never see them again. We know that when a man goes in, he has to first take a shower before he is allowed to be with the woman. And I'm sorry, before he's allowed to rape the woman. And in that ministry's office, like, I've been in there before, and you hear through the walls the shower turn on. And you can't help but just feel so angry because these women, they don't have a choice. This is not the life that they want. And we've called the hotlines, the sex trafficking hotlines, and they say, well, we'll have to, contact the local police. That's what they do. That's the way that they organize things. And so, yeah, we feel absolutely helpless.
So prostitution is what they would get charged with. The men or the handlers never get charged with anything.
No.
Prisonership is not something that they would, because the girls are not pressing charges themselves. The girls are not coming forward themselves. In fact, I was talking with our friend the other day, and she said, I'm guessing these girls are not legal. Like, really?
Oh, probably not.
And so that's another coercion. You can't leave because the US will kick you out, and you'll be, and I think that's just another fear tactic that they may potentially are using with these girls to keep them silent and obedient.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can't even picture what life would be like outside of this place. I mean, I'm sure they don't even know what America is like. All they know is the men that come in and hurt them. The ministry next door said they've seen all sorts of men go in and out, from wearing doctor scrubs to wearing business suits to wearing even a police officer's shirt. I mean, it's sickening, but that has become, they sit back and they can't do anything.
Yeah. And these girls are not getting the money.
Oh, goodness, no. And there's a madame in there who is like the mother's whatever, and she's the one who answers the door. So, like, the men will make the phone call, and then they'll go to the inside little room and they'll ring the doorbell, and the madame will open it and see if it is who it's supposed to be, and then we'll allow the person in. We heard a story while we were there that there was a couple, like a man and a woman, and the man said he was having back issues, and so he was going to this spa once a week to supposedly get massages. And he actually asked his wife to drop him off there one day. And so she drove him there, and he got out and went into the spa and, said be back in an hour or whatever. Well, she went to leave and she realized, oh, shoot, he still has my key fob. And so she went to go inside to get the key fob from her husband. And the madame opened the door and she said, I need to see my husband. And the madame said, I'm sorry, you're not allowed in here. And the wife could see enough through the crack that she was like, oh, no, I'm coming in. And she barged in and she said she saw her husband on a bed, and there were no massage tables. It was all beds on the floor. And she knew what he was about to do. And so
they got divorced.
And they got divorced. But okay, so here's what I got to thinking when I heard that. It's the clients who need to come forward. I guess it could prove still prostitution instead of what's actually going on, but come on. Like it has to be obvious that these women don't want to be there.
Right.
I don't get why this is so hard.
Right. So it seems like two laws would need to be changed.
Yes, correct.
And because right now it's like, well, we can't do anything because we don't really know. It's speculation, it's hearsay, you know what I mean? There's we need proof, we need tangible proof. Because we even thought, like, what about the person who owns the building? Would they really want this happening in their building? Now, I guess at the end of the day, they might not care. They just want bills paid on time. But you just got to wonder, like, who could be the one that says no? But like you said, as soon as somebody says no, they'll just pack up shop and go somewhere else and open it up somewhere else. So really the laws about all of this would truly need to change so there's less loopholes.
So what was it that they said? I've been trying to remember this. There's something different in the law when it comes to Asian spas versus regular spas. Do you remember them talking about that?
No.
Where did
We'll
I
have to look it up.
Okay, because there is some sort of a difference. But guys, it's not just spas, but it can be the restaurants, it can be the nail salons. So here's one thing that I do know. Rafa House is a sex trafficking organization out of Joplin, Missouri. And Stephanie Freed is the one who kind of founded that. And I know her from years past. But the local police of Joplin picked her brain on what trafficking looks like. And they took trainings, not just like an hour-long training online of where they read something and they answer the questions. Because that's what I've been told a lot of police officers do to supposedly get training on trafficking. They actually wanted to learn and know. And so they did. They studied it and they ended up doing investigations. And before long, they busted several brothels, saving the women within nail salons in Joplin. And it was because the local police said, not in our town. And I mean, that's truly what needs to happen. But you're going to still find officers who say, oh, this stuff doesn't happen in America.
So the local police said, we're not going to consider this prostitution. We're going to consider this prisoners. Like, we're going to consider this for, like, I mean, if a child were forced to stay in a room, they would barge in. CPS would be called. They would barge in. They would take the child. They don't need evidence. They just need to have suspicion for that kind of thing. And CPS is called and actions taken, hopefully.
Yeah. And so in my mind, it should be the same with these things because these women don't know our language. They can't say if they're trapped.
Right.
So it should just be suspicion in my opinion. But yeah, these were nail salons and they were hidden in the back and they saved. It wasn't just they busted it. They literally took the women and took them to a safe house and helped them. And that's what needs to happen.
That's what needs to happen. Yeah. Yeah. So these policemen specifically didn't care about the laws. They said, we're going to do what's right.
Yes. And well, and once they went in and busted in and really took a look at what was going on and dug deeper, then they realized, okay, this is against the law.
Right.
But you have to go in with that mentality to start.
Right. Right. Well, and it wouldn't have held up in court if they did something totally illegal, but they basically went in and said, we're going to investigate, which is like half of what people want. Like, let's at least investigate because something suspicious is happening.
Yes, go in there, find a dang translator. I'm getting fired up. I apologize, but get a translator and go in there and start talking and figuring out what this story is and give those women hope. Like, share with them, hey, if you are held here and not, like you left your family, you were promised these things, like, it's not your fault. Like, we will help you. But they're not able to hear those things.
I asked Rachel, what happens when these ladies get old, like, and they're not as desirable anymore? And she basically said they don't live that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the average lifespan is 7 years. And when you think of, sexually transmitted diseases, you think of pregnancies and illegal abortions and just the wear and tear on your body. Like, I mean, guys, this is not some lavish thing like you would think. It's terrible. It's a terrible life, and you can't live that long.
It's torturous.
It really is. And you got men coming in who have all of these fantasies, and they're going to play it out on this poor woman who has no choice.
So I came home and I looked up the website. And when you look up the website, it says deep tissue massage, all these things. And then, oh, it's so weird because it's not, I'm going to look it up really quick while I'm speaking. Because, okay, so it says best Asian massage services. It says Swedish, all these things. And then it says our gallery. And in this gallery are 9 pictures of Asian teenagers. Now, maybe they're older, who knows, but they look young. They're tiny, they're in bathing suits, and it says our gallery. Now, here's what I know. If I'm going to get a massage and they have pictures of their masseuses, it's a headshot. It's a, you know what I mean? It is not. So again, the more you dig in, the more you're like, okay, so then I Google it and I look up the Google reviews and Yelp reviews because surprisingly, there are some. And the Google reviews are all men. And they say this, very helpful massage for my back, would recommend it, that kind of thing. And then one gave it a 1 star and it said, I was told it would be $60, but when I got there, it was $100 because it was my first time. So I left a review and I, in big bold letters, said, this is a brothel. Like, I don't know what else to do besides get the word out and let people know and start picketing these places and put signs up and like either deter the men that are going or create such a buzz the police have to do something.
Yeah. So I'll be curious to see, will
I get taken down immediately?
Yeah. I mean,
I'll let you guys know. This is like, I'll let you know if I start getting weird text messages and like, harassment or something.
I mean, that's all we know to do. And so I posted something on Instagram and Facebook and I'm like, help, like seriously, help us because we don't know what else to do. So if somebody has a situation that they've actually been able to bust the brothel, help the women, please tell us how, because these are the little things that we're doing. Like one of the ladies who worked with the ministry next door, she saw what looked like a younger kid go in that was similar age to her son, and she met him outside and said, you are not going in there. This is a brothel. These women don't want to be there. You are going home. And he did. He went on home. But I mean, you do the little things, but somewhere along the way, this has to stop.
Now, I have to say, I was sharing the story with people and some said, well, maybe they're just sex workers. Maybe this is just what their chosen profession. And we have to, like, this is where we're bold and firm. There is no one, and would you say no one?
I would say no one.
No one who chooses this line of work as a profession. They are coerced, manipulated, gaslit. Maybe they even believe they chose it because of the manipulation they've experienced. But they do not choose this. This is, we can boldly say, about 100% not consensual.
Correct. And it could be, maybe they chose it in the beginning thinking it was going to be a little bit different than what it, like maybe even still, there has to be a background to why somebody would like abuse in their childhood. They don't feel like they are worth doing anything else, And so maybe they say yes in the beginning, but I'm telling you, after years in these places, they don't want to be there. But I'm going to throw another issue at you. Let's say we start to make this change in our country and we change the laws and we start to figure out how to save these women. We don't have safe house beds enough to put them in. We don't have places for them to go to help them. That is another issue that we have in America. Like there's just not enough beds to house these people. So then they go to a domestic violence shelter, but then, they only get a month there or so. And then they're out on the streets. And then the only job they know to do is sex work. And they're right back in the same situation. And so there's just a lot of things that need to change in our country,
Right.
especially when we talk about the freedoms our country has. And there's a lot who aren't free.
Now I work there, or I have heard a lady in our town who was in the life, as she would call it, and has been out for 20 years. And she now has a nonprofit, and she's a first step for people to go when they're ready to get out. And then she supports them onto the next step. But we know that even if somebody chooses to get out, the likelihood of them going back is fairly high. Do you know the stats on that?
It changes, but I want to say it's like a dozen times. Like it's pretty high because you you go back and forth and seeing like, okay, well, I'll be honest, for me, I didn't feel like I fit in the normal world. I didn't feel like I was worth being normal, that I even, you see how regular people live and the things that they get to do. And I felt like I was less than, and that's just not for me. I'm not ever going to get to have that type of life. And so, I mean, it's all what has been built inside of them for years. You don't just change that lickety split. It takes time.
Right. Right. It could be fear that they go back. It could be self-worth that they go back. It could be feeling like they don't have other options.
Mm-hmm.
And probably all of it.
Probably all of it. Yeah. And then once you do go back, then it's even harder because then then the shame comes. Well, this was my choice. Why would I had it good. Why did I leave?
So, okay. So even though you would say it's not consensual, this is not what I choose, it's a forced choice at that point.
Yes.
Like I have no other option, so I guess I'll go here because this is the world I know.
Yeah.
But then there's also the idea of drugs. A lot of times these pimps are the ones supplying drugs. And if somebody's addicted to drugs, then they need to perform. I mean, this lady, when we talked to her, said she had a quota every day. She had to meet a quota. And if she didn't, then she would be withheld any drugs that her body was used to, or her pimp would be mad at her. She also told us that maybe we should get her on the podcast. Ooh, that's a good one. I'll reach out. Like, why didn't we think of that before? But she told us that their brothel would get in a car, 2 cars, a bus, a van, whatever, and drive places and set up shop near the Super Bowl, set up shop and all the, during big game days and things. And her pimp would take them to hot places where they knew men would be. And that was just what they did. And so they traveled the country at times.
Yeah. There's times like, I live close to Nashville, Tennessee now, and there's certain corners where you will see a woman, and not too far off, you'll see a man sitting in a car watching, and that's her pimp. And why this can't get stopped? It's literally right in plain sight.
Right. And so the laws need to be focused on the pimp, not on the girls.
Yes. Agreed.
Well, we stirred up a lot. And I think this is what happens at our events, right? You shed light on a situation that people don't even realize is happening in plain sight. And so it stirs up this like holy discontent, like not in my town, like no, not to my daughter, not to my family, like, no, nobody deserves this type of treatment. So what can we do?
I want to share a story because I think this will answer your question, but also hopefully be an encouragement to people, because it's bigger than us. It's bigger than any of us could ever do to fight it. But let me first share this story. So one of my friends who was at a safe house with me, she was in the hotel. She was one of those that they had purposefully gotten her addicted to drugs so that she felt dependent on her pimp. And she would have to get a certain quota. She would go work the streets and bring it back, and then she would be rewarded her drugs. Otherwise, when you're detoxing, it's miserable, it's painful. And so she had to work to get that drug money. Anyway, so one particular time she had hit like one of her limits, like rock bottom, and she's sitting in the hotel and she literally has a knife in her hand and she's done. Like she's going to take her life. And mind you, this lady, she got tricked into the life by another 15-year-old friend at school. And so this was not her choice. She got taken and she was raped by 4 men. And like that became her every weekend that she had to do. Like this is not a choice she made. But those who are looking at her life assume, oh, she just went down the wrong path. And now here she is years later and she's done. Like she can't take it anymore. And so she's ready to take her life. And she said, for whatever reason, she dropped the knife and dropped to her knees and started to pray. And she prayed for an angel. She just prayed for anybody to come and help her. And time passed, probably a couple days, and she was back to where she needed a fix. She needed her drugs. And so she was back out on the street and she was working a corner. And a lady drove up and she said, God is telling me to help you. I want to help you. Please get in the car and I will get you help. And my friend said, no, I don't want your help. Like in her mind, she needed her fix. She didn't need somebody to come along and whisk her away and try to help her that way. She needed her fix. And pimps do that on purpose. So here she just keeps telling this lady, no, go on. Please leave because I need the next customer. And that lady in the car tried and tried and tried and eventually gave up and drove on. A year later, my friend was sitting in her hotel room and it hit her. That was my angel. God did hear my prayer and he really did bring an angel to help me. Now I didn't accept it, but he really, like he heard me and it changed her life. She left that hotel. She went to a shelter. She found where she needed to go and she ended up in a safe house and graduated and began to take her life back. But it started with her realizing her answered prayer in that woman. Now, that woman will never know. In her mind, she thinks she tried something small, it didn't work, and she probably went on about her life feeling like there's nothing she can do. But she rescued her, and she'll never know that. But my point to all of that is the tiny things that you can do for people matter. When God prompts your heart to do something, there's a reason, and it might not take effect in that moment, maybe a year or two down the road that it really sinks in. But you're helping these survivors by planting these little seeds of hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think when I'm thinking of the parents who have family members who are stuck in trauma or in negative coping skills, I think of, speaking life into them as much as possible, seeing them 3 steps ahead of where they are. So instead of getting in this, why are you doing it? Why aren't you listening? Why aren't you, I'm sure we want to grab them by the shoulders and say, don't you see what I see? Continuing to speak life as much as possible. Now, I do believe there's a bit of radical honesty that needs to happen. I don't think Granny coddled you in any way. I think she spoke truths to you, even if they were hard to hear. And so there may need to be some of that bold truths to somebody that you're saying, you need help. Let's get you help. Life doesn't have to be this way. This isn't, you're speaking boldly, but speaking life and speaking truth at the same time, offering ideas. But at the end of the day, we also know survivors need to make their own choice. But at the end of the day, we also know they're not in clear mind in order to do that. So it's a balance for sure.
Just keep pouring into them. And even if you feel like it's not making any headway, it is. That's where God comes in. You do what he calls you to do and he will do the rest, even when you feel completely defeated. And that's what Granny did. That's what those around her did for me. Prayers like you wouldn't even imagine. And now we're seeing the fruits of all of it.
Absolutely. You guys can support what we're doing too, and by either booking us to come speak at your church or school. Rachel shares her story. And so obviously we can tailor any conversation to meet the needs of where you're at. whether it's middle school or high school or adults, right? We can tailor things. But Rachel will share a bit of her story. And then we also talk about the healing journey and the hope that's found. So if you're interested in that, check us out. Go to STOPSIS at protonmail.com in order to email us about a potential booking. If you have a podcast or you know somebody who has a podcast that would like Rachel on to speak, let us know about that as well. STOPSIS at protonmail.com. We'll put all the links in the show notes. You could also purchase a shirt. We've got a handful left after this weekend. Typically for every event, we do a new shirt. So these are limited edition, and you can reach out to us on social media or, STOPSIS at protonmail.com. They're $30 a piece, and you can Venmo or PayPal us, and we'll ship it straight to your door. Any other ways that people can take this information and do something with it?
Yeah,
leave a review on a spa's websites.
Yes. For sure. Yeah, and just keep spreading the word, spreading awareness. And, whenever we come in and we speak, it's not just this. I mean, it's a hard trafficking story, but there's so many other pieces that people can take away. So if your community has hidden trauma within it, it's just incredible to see the freedom that comes from just simply speaking truth. And that's what it gives your community a chance to do.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for listening and getting fired up with us, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's why we were always have to end with something positive, because it's frustrating to feel like there's nothing you can do, but that's not true.
That's not true.
Prayer is doing something. Speaking life is doing something. Educating yourself, keeping your eyes open. You don't know who you can save and impact, the ripple effect of you even just knowing this information. So there is hope, healing is happening, and freedom is possible.
Amen. That sounds like an I declare right there.
I know, right? All right. Well, I'll end with this. I declare God's supernatural favor over my life. What I could not make happen on my own, God makes happen for me. Supernatural opportunities, healing, restoration, and breakthroughs are here. I am getting stronger, healthier, and wiser. I discover talent I didn't know I had, and I accomplish my God-given dream. This is my declaration, and this is my declaration for you. Have an awesome day, you guys, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email OpenBlindEyes at protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email STOPSIS at protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.